President Putin has worked methodically over the last 2 decades to turn Russian society into a kind of propaganda bubble. I don't believe he can wall off indefinitely Russians from the truth, especially as realities begin to puncture that bubble.
It isn't just Ukrainians fleeing. Russians are leaving their own homeland before the Iron Curtain fully descends on Russia due to Putin's war. Here's a shopping mall in Moscow. Stores shuttered due to historic sanctions. But it isn't only about the economic hit. The Kremlin is escalating its crackdown on dissent. More than 13,000 anti-war protesters have been arrested. And spreading, quote, fake news, sound familiar? Or even describing the Ukraine invasion as a war is now a crime, punishable by 15 years in prison. Joining me now is Julia Ioffe, founding partner and Washington correspondent for Puck News. Thank you very much for being here, Julia. You've written a piece, which I have here, which is called Inside Russia's Media Black Hole. How are they sort of manufacturing consent for this war?
Well, they're basically shutting their population off completely from the reality of this war. You know, now that anything other than the official line on what's happening in the war is branded fake news and is punishable by up to 15 years in jail, most publications are scared to publish anything. And what was left of the independent media has been shut down, and basically hundreds of journalists have fled Russia. So what Russians are seeing of this war is not what we're seeing. They think, or they're being told, that the war is just in the Donbass, that there are very minimal casualties on the Russian side, that the Russian side is being incredibly generous and careful with the civilians, that Ukrainian civilians are greeting them as liberators, that this is not a war against the Ukrainian people, but against the Nazis who have seized control over them with pressure from the U.S. Of course, none of this is true, but that's what Russians are being told, and there's no other narrative. So most Russians support the war.
And yet, more than 13,000 have protested and gotten arrested. So people are getting real information. And you've reported, you were tweeting out back in the USSR sort of tweet today saying that you've heard from several friends there are now limits in Moscow grocery stores on how many items a person can buy at a time. You need to text it back to the USSR. People allegedly are fleeing to Finland. About 44,000 people crossed the Russian border into Finland in February, up from 27,000 the same month last year. It seems to me that some people are figuring it out and either protesting or actually leaving.
Well, the thing is, this has not been a totalitarian country this whole time. It was an authoritarian country, and it was very plugged into the world. And there was a very educated class of people, especially in the big cities, who traveled a lot, who spoke other languages. There was an independent media. It was small and marginalized and eking out an existence, but it existed. And people were able to access other news sources from abroad. Now that's all gone unless you go through the extra effort of using a VPN to mask your location in Russia so that you can access these foreign sources of information. But again, these groups are, these are people who, it's kind of like in the US, the people, let's say with Trump, people who are going to like Trump no matter what, and people who are going to dislike Trump no matter what. And then if let's say there's a war, people are going to have kind of preset ideas about it and attitudes toward it. So these two groups of people were in existence before this. Now there's just a really hardcore crackdown that we haven't seen the likes of before.
You know, what's interesting is that it feels like what you're going to see happening is an economic drain that is sort of plunging Russia, kind of into almost sort of an Afghanistan state where there's just nothing there. Economically, they're being stripped. Even Goldman Sachs has gotten out. And now you have Russia, the Kremlin, threatening to seize the assets of companies that are leaving, seize their airline jets, seize $10 billion worth of assets. Okay, seize it and do what with it? The ruble is in shambles. Their economy is cratering. Seize it and so what?
That's the question. I saw some Russian friends joking today, that what are you going to do? You're going to take over an Apple store and the iPhones are going to magically start appearing there?
Right.
And how are people going to pay for it now that, they're cut off from the Western financial system? Russia still has an economy, and it has been, an extractive economy. It has always had oil, gas, other natural resources, gold, diamonds, potash, all kinds of precious metals, aluminum. So it will still be able to sell these things on the world market. There will always be a buyer for them. For example, China or India, who are not lining up with the US and Europe on this. The question is, to what extent can it prop up the economy? And what happens to all these people that you're seeing on the streets right now who are used to a different lifestyle and a different level of comfort? You know, Russia, St. Petersburg were fantastic cities before this. I think Moscow was a nicer city to live in than New York City, I would say. What happens now? What happens to the young people who are used to traveling, who are used to having Apple Pay for everything, including the metro and their local bodega? What happens when they, can't watch any of these movies or access Spotify? Do they flee? Do they protest? Or do they just shut up and wear Soviet-made jeans? I don't know if you saw the Bolshevichka factory, which means Bolshevik woman, is dusting off, apparently, its Soviet-era manufacturing equipment to make Russian-made jeans because Levi's has left. H&M, all these other
Havana was a beautiful city, too. You can have a closed economy, and there'll be some people who trade with you. They ask folks in Cuba how that's working out for them. And the brain drain will come because eventually you're going to lose your educated class. You're going to get the hell out of there. He has broken 2 countries, Vladimir Putin has. A pure thug. Thank you very much, Sheila Ioffe. Appreciate you.